Sirens, Slammers, and Service, a podcast for female first responders by female first responders. My name is Nikki and I will be your host. As a former correctional officer in Alberta for almost 2 decades and the founder of Blue Line Fitness Testing, which provides law enforcement fitness testing and first responder wellness workshops, I started this podcast as a way for female first responders to share the trials, tribulations, and triumphs of their daily work. I want to showcase the unique perspectives, skill sets, and personalities that women bring to a first responder career and share their stories. So get ready to laugh your ass off, learn a whole bunch, and be inspired by some pretty badass women. Let's go. Welcome back, guys. We are on episode 9 with Sirens, Slammers, and Service, and I am so excited today to introduce one of my very good friends, Courtney McCarron. Courtney is the Sexual Assault Review Coordinator for K Division. She oversees the Sexual Assault Review Team, KSART, if you're looking for those acronyms. She has been with the RCMP for 17 years, and her and I know each other through rugby, as per usual for most of my guests, because rugby is the best sport ever. We also shared a very good friend, Tamara from Fort McMurray. Tamara and I had the honor and privilege of playing on the World Police Fire Games team in 2011. Unfortunately, we did lose Tamara approximately 3 years ago. Crazy. I can't believe she's been gone that long. But I am excited to have you. I can't wait to hear your journey. Courtney has also been the recipient of the 2021 Police Officer of the Year from Alberta Women in Public Safety. So you're an award winner. You're the Officer of the Year. Let's get started. Talk to me. How are you today?
I am great. I'm great. Every day with you is great.
You're a liar, but I love you.
Well, it's just weird because we're not having beers together right now, but hey, I'll take it.
Exactly. Or on the side of a rugby pitch. Okay, so let's jump in. I want to hear all about your journey. I know parts of it, but let's talk about it. How did you get into the RCMP? What was your journey? When did you kind of figure out that this is what you wanted to do? Where have you been? And how did you get to where you are now?
So I mounted with the RCMP from Newfoundland. That's where I was born and raised, just outside St. John's. And my whole life grew up, I wanted to be a conservation officer, fish and wildlife. I had an uncle that's what he did. I thought he was the coolest person in the world. And that was my passion, ever since I was little, to do that. And so when I graduated high school, I reached out and I said, hey, what do I need to do? And so he said, go to university, get a biology degree, get something that's going to help you in that field. So I started, and MUN, Memorial University of Newfoundland, had a bar on campus that took Canadian Tire money. So I didn't fare very well in my afternoon classes of math and chemistry and physics and all the smart course I had to take. And my uncle had come to visit, and he said, have you considered the RCMP? He worked as a guard for the RCMP in his hometown. And he said, just go to an information session. That's all I want to do. Because I said to him, I don't want to be a pig writing tickets. I just didn't want anything to do, right? That was my scope of police, was just somebody sit in a car writing tickets. Side note, to this day, do not ask me to write a ticket. If you get a ticket from me, you are the biggest asshole going. That is the only reason why I'll give you a ticket. I will find any reason to not write one. And so I said, okay, fine. Yeah. I respected him. I'll go to the information session. And so I did. And I remember just sitting there, and a friend came with me, and it was all of these different career opportunities flash before your eyes, right? There may have been a millisecond of somebody in a traffic car, but everything else was SWAT and IDENT and PDS and, police dogs and just all helicopters and boats. And it was holy crap, this is something that, there's over 300 job titles in the RCMP. So I knew I wouldn't get stagnant. I wouldn't get bored. I wouldn't be writing tickets, and that excited me. And so the next day I switched. I was failing anyway. So I switched from biology and went to criminology and did my 2-year criminology diploma through MUN. Most of it I did at home because I was still working full-time, a couple of jobs, and I aced it. I aced the criminology courses, aced sociology, psych. That was truly then my niche. And so then I applied for the RCMP, got accepted. So August 2005, went off to the big old land of Depot there. I hate Saskatchewan, not my favorite place. Sorry for all you Rough Riders and Saskatchewan Prairie people, but flat, as you can see, and coming from, the Atlantic coast with all the scenery and hills, and not my favorite, but yeah, an ocean. So yeah, did my 6 months of training at Depot. I gotta say, I found that hard to be in that fishbowl, just to be, you're like everybody else. Cause I'm not like everybody else. I don't want to be like everybody else. You know, you want to be you and you want to do the things that you love and you just want to be able to express yourself. And you're like, no, conform and everybody be the same. And so I didn't enjoy that part of Depot. Couldn't wait to get out. And of course, then they sent me to Fort McMurray because I made a smart ass comment that not every newfie who leaves Newfoundland goes to Fort McMurray. And like, oh, are you sure about that? And off to Fort Mac, I get posted. And I was bitter as all hell because I was dating somebody at the time. It was a member. And he got posted to like, you know, the south west corner of the province. And here I was northeast. So that made sense as well. And so I wasn't really happy about Fort Mac. Like it took some time. Like you're a new cop, and, you know, like especially any females listening, you know what it's like. You have to prove that you're not an idiot. You're not a pussy. I could fight. I could get in. I didn't mind being like tough and getting down and dirty when I had to. And so, you know, in Fort Mac at that time, like it was 06, like January 06, I graduated. So it was winter. Like that was when really Fort Mac kind of started to hit that boom. And then it just started like, you know, people are coming out shooting at each other. There's gang wars. It was intense. And so rugby was my thing, right? Before I get into RCMP, I played rugby for the Newfoundland team, under 19 team in Newfoundland. I played for the Bayman Club, my home club. I played on special leagues that, you know, we just took great people put together. I played for the university. Like it was my thing. I freaking loved it. And so I heard there was a team in Fort Mac. So I started coming out, started playing. And then that truly to me was just like, oh, like it was eye opener to the point that I would always tell officers after that, like what you loved before the RCMP or what you love to do that still as a police officer, because it's so easy to get into this like world where you're only hanging out with cops and everybody's a bad guy and every story is a bad story and everybody's a shithead. And it was like, that was the mentality that you live. So when you go out into the world, you just see this dark cloud. You just see that everything's bad and everybody's a criminal. When truly, when you step out of that and look like, you know, the population as a whole, like only a small percentage are we actually dealing with. So I joined the rugby club, the Fort Mac Knights, and you had a huge club, a huge women's team, men's team, and you get to meet all these different people from different walks of life. And some were assholes at first, and some are, you know, like I remember there was one guy, he was such a jerk to me. And I just didn't care. Like, I didn't care. Like, hey, I'm here to play rugby. I'm here to have fun. I don't give a shit that your dad got arrested by cops, like, or that you got arrested. Like, I don't care. And, you know, and today he's probably one of my favorite people from the club. And I know that if I was ever in uniform, and in a bind, he'd be the first to come to my rescue, who would probably be the first to throw rocks. Now he'd be the first to rescue me, right? And so you have an opportunity to just meet all these different people with, you know, their own families and let, hey, this is normal, real people, right? Mm-hmm. And people who had aspirations to become a police officer one day and they're intrigued by you, but for whatever reason, they decide to become a power engineer and make, you know, 5 times as much money. So good for them. And then other people, like you get to meet their kids, right? Like I had one friend, Hilda Peters, you might remember Hilda, yes! And he passed away, unfortunately, recently as well. Well, a year ago now. And so Hilda's daughter is like, God, and I lived next door to them. And I'd be like, hey, you know, if you want to party, let me know. I'll come clean up. I'll buy you booze. And I'm like, no, I'm just going to still watch a movie. I'm like, these are not the 16-year-olds that I'm used to dealing with, right? Like good people. And so that was truly, that kept me in Fort Mac longer, the people and the friends. And I still consider Fort Mac home today. But Fort Mac was such a great first post. As bitter as I was at first, like the experience was just incredible amount of experience. And I did 3 years on the front line and then moved into the persons crime unit doing mainly like, well, at that time it was pretty much small homicides, but went into more major crime role and had an opportunity then to go back to the watch before I left. And so just enjoyed it. And then my husband and I, or really his fiance at the time, were like, hey, you know, like I can do general duty policing anywhere. Like, let's go somewhere pretty. So we chose Hinton. Everybody's like, why did you go to Hinton? I'm like, well, we really wanted to get to like Golden or Revelstoke or somewhere where we could go do mountain sledding. That was our passion or goal at the time. And we knew if we left the division and it wouldn't be guaranteed where I go. So we said, oh, well, let's go to Hinton. We always stopped in Hinton. It's kind of pretty. It's by the mountains. Like, you know, you just look west and don't look at the pulp mill. You're great. And
plug your nose a little bit and you're good. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was our whole plan. Like just go. And, you know, we both worked really hard. He's My husband's a plumber gas fitter. So, both of us worked really hard and just wanted to, enjoy life and have good hunting, good outdoor stuff. And then, it turns out Hinton just has great water. And I ended up having 3 kids back to back, which there was that. So, got promoted in Hinton, did the general duty corporal thing there in Hinton. And then our oldest son had some medical issues. And so we had gotten the compassionate transfer into the city. And things just, it's always just funny. I always find it's funny how life just takes you where you need to go, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I found myself in criminal operations in a policy section, which then I turned out to be a geek that loved to write policy and be sitting there like, oh, please let me write your policy, sir. And it was like, gladly. But I got to work with Tamara directly, and Tamara was one of my best friends. So I got to work with her directly for 6 months before she passed, and then went over and worked with victim services on an Indigenous programs unit at the government of Alberta. And so that was really eye-opening, just to kind of see like how the government of Alberta works, and to see where some of the gaps in our policing may be, especially when it came to MMIWG response. And so got to like really experience that. And then the backstory there is when I was younger, I had a really good friend that went missing out of Calgary, and his body was found about a month later. And so never truly got answers from what happened with him, but I could just take that experience and in a sense be able to sympathize and empathize with people who have had a loved one go missing, and like all those emotions, all that hope and all that fears, and then what happens on the end when it's not the outcome that you want, right? Mm-hmm. So truly you reflect on the experiences in life that you've had and use those in your policing experience. And so did a short comment over there. And then I came back. I was asked to come back to criminal operations after Tamara passed to continue on some of her work and start this new program. I was dubbed the sexual assault review coordinator and tasked to establish an external review committee to review our files. And I looked at the boss and said, like, well, shouldn't we review our own files first, just before we bring somebody else in? And he's like, yeah, that might be a good idea. And started from there. And truly just like, it was a clean slate. It's almost embarrassing to say we truly had nothing for sexual violence. We didn't have a policy. We didn't have a single resource or a training program. We had nothing. And, once you learned how unique these crimes are in terms of like victims response, and how so often police are failing because we don't understand trauma, and we don't understand the bias and even just what consent is. Even, you think of everyday average people, what does it mean to say consent? And people don't understand that. So there was a lot of work to do. And I spent the last 3 years writing strategy plans, writing business cases, pushing for a unit, and finally fall of last year, we got the unit established. So KSART became a reality with 2 positions, and we're just waiting for that sergeant to come in and fill the other spot here. But it's been incredible. It's been incredible to just see that grow and that passion and let that, and just see that fruitate into something.
I love that. That's amazing. And so I'm going to take us back a little bit. So you were in Fort McMurray for how long? How many years were you there? 5?
7.5.
7.5. Okay. Then you went to your general duty, then into the major crimes kind of unit. And so when you're doing that, like what was some of your roles and responsibilities? Are you now in plain clothes? Are you still in uniform? Like how did that kind of get fleshed out?
Yeah. So then once I was in that unit under the general investigation section, and it was plain clothes. So more like detective type work. We don't have the detectives in RCMP, but that would be equivalent to what EPS and CPS has, those detective roles. So that, and as person's crime, you're investigating any real crime against person. And so more serious type crimes. So we had, shaken babies, sudden infant deaths would fall on us, sexual assaults of children, right up to homicides. And so your role and like robberies, stabbings, like anything that was half serious, ended up coming into our unit. So I said a lot of the times it ended up being homicides just because it was so busy during that time. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I got to do all the different roles, like, interviewing and writing all the warrants. Became, early on in my career, became very proficient in drafting authorizations, judicial authorizations, and right up to primary investigator on homicides. So just really got to do the whole kit and caboodle, which it was fun. Like I really enjoyed the complexity of those crimes and just the moving pieces, and yeah.
I think that's really cool because like you said, when people think of RCMP, that's what they think of. They think of yellow pants on the side of the road writing tickets, right? They
Yeah.
don't think of all these other roles that can fall out. And we had actually on episode 3, I believe it was, we had Sandra Maris on, who's another rugby player, who's a blood spatter analyst. And she, again, like I had no idea that was part of the RCMP. I had no idea that there was like these specific people and that they weren't scientists, that they were like members that were doing this work, right? So I love kind of like being able to talk about the different things that you were doing. And I think, those skills that you were developing in Fort McMurray for interviewing and for investigation and stuff probably played a really huge factor in the role that you're playing now in kind of coordinating this unit, getting things up and running, being able to review files and say like, oh, we probably should have done this. Like, oh, I wish I would have known this back then. I would have interviewed like
Mhm.
this, or I would have done it like this, right? So, and again, amazing that at 7 years in, or even, 6 or 5, you were already into this like kind of level of complexity within the RCMP. Because I think that's the other kind of myth out there is that, oh, you're not going to get into that for another 10 or 15 years. You're going to have to be a beat cop for 10 or 15 years, right? Like, and sometimes going to those rural postings are a blessing because you're doing lots of it. You're doing a lot of those little roles. Like I know for me, when I worked at Edmonton Remand Center, we had all the support, right? So we didn't have to do the warrants and we didn't have to do, like the casework stuff. We had caseworkers, we had, sentence and min people. Then when I went down to Red Deer, it was like, oh no, that's you. You do all of those things. We don't have
Yeah.
those people, right? And so you're like, oh, okay, let me learn that because I didn't have to do that in the other
It's
place,
so funny you
right?
say that because we truly were spoiled in Fort Macleod. I mean, there was an immense staff for everything. Like you had somebody that was writing up your paperwork for you, and somebody else was printing off your fingerprint form, and on your really minor files, even the steno would write up the file, and you just had to review, start, complete. Like you was so spoiled. And so while I was still in Fort Mac, I had an opportunity to do a relief stint in Nunavut. I went to Chesterfield Inlet
Oh
for
my
6 weeks.
God.
So it's a tiny fly-in little community, and it was a two-man post, a corporal and a constable, and the corporal had injured his arm on summer vacation, tore a bicep, and so we were fortunate enough that once he was, kind of on the road recovery, they let him come back to the community. So, I mean, it was unheard of to have 3 police officers there, but then it was great because he just, kind of did the in-house, stuff that your boss is supposed to do. And me and the other constable got to run around and do the Northern Police and stuff. And so, but it was amazing. Like it was just mind boggling to me coming from this big detachment of support that suddenly everything is on these 2 people. Like for example, one day we had this new pickup truck and it wouldn't work properly. Like something with the starter where you didn't have to have keys in it. The truck would just run. You could drive it all over the place. And we're just like, somebody's going to steal our truck. And it wouldn't turn off until it ran out of gas. Like it was just a disaster. And so as much as we were really in a really pro-police community, it's like, you're still government. Like there's still like, So the local mechanic's like, yeah, I could probably get you in a couple months. I'm like I truly see you every single day. You haven't had a vehicle in your bay in 3 weeks. Like you can do like no, right? So and I was working with this French member from Montreal. He's just a great guy, and I'm looking at him like this city boy. I'm like, I don't know much about mechanic stuff. I'm looking at him like, well, I probably know more than you do. So we get on the phone to Ford in Winnipeg. And they're like, well, okay, well, can you bring it to mechanic? I'm like, yeah, no slice. Like, not gonna happen. And he's like, okay, well, let me walk you through how to like disconnect and reconnect your starter. And like, so here we're on the phone with Winnipeg. Like, okay, we'll look for like, and seriously over the phone trying to mechanic this truck to get it working. And we did, right? And it was
Yes.
just, but it was so funny, like, cause it was like, I remember there was one guy and we wanted to do a remand on him because he was breaking into all the businesses and houses and stealing cases of Coke that was worth $80 for a case of Coke. So we go, I'm like, yeah, no, we need to remand him because he's a privileged offender. So the process was I had to first call the defense lawyer to see if he would be available for Thursday at 10 a.m. to do a hearing. I'm like, well, I haven't arrested him yet, but we would schedule that. Then I called the Crown. The Crown's like, yeah, okay, no, 10. Then I called the judge to make sure the judge or the justice could be available. So I'm like arranging all of these people for something that hasn't yet happened. And then the defense is like, okay, let me see. What are you asking? I'll see if I can secure conditions for his bail and if I'll have somebody that can, basically watch over him. And I'm like, well, we haven't arrested him. Like, you haven't arrested him. And then came the hunt to find him and prayed to God that he wasn't out on the land hunting because then he could be gone for weeks. So finally did was able to arrest him, bring him in. We had this prearranged bail here and meeting, and everybody's there. And then my partner's like, okay, and now write down everything that justice says. I'm like, what? Like, yeah. So everything he said, and I'm like scribbling out, because then I had to go back and type it all up, send it to him, send it here. Like it was it was like a week-long process to do one bail package for a simple break and enter and theft. I'm like, okay, I get it. Never again. We won't do that. Like it's just so complicated. But you did if you had a prisoner overnight, then you had to sit there and guard them. If your plumbing didn't work, you had to fix your plumbing. Like people would come in to do their permit tests, their road tests for their driver's license, and you had to do the road tests with them. Right? We had a form at the detachment where because it wasn't a dry community, it was restricted for alcohol. If you wanted alcohol, you had to go to the police station to fill out your form. And then we sat on a committee and you're like, should Nikki have this 3 2-4s of vodka this week? I'm like, I can't tell you anything, but we did have an issue with Nikki on Friday night. Okay, we're going to cut her off for a week. Well, now she's just going to bootleg it in for the next week. But so it was just mind-boggling, the stuff you had to do. And I remember, the member there, he had all these snotogram emails about having to enter things on CPIC and maintenance on files, and we're like, I don't know how to do that. And so I'd call up Fort Mac and like our CPIC section with 8 people in there, and we're like, hey, how do I do that? They're like, why are you doing that? Like, there is no support. Like, we do everything. They would truly do everything. And so it was such a great experience and just eye-opening, right? Like, these members still had the same requirements as a big detachment. Like, you need to make sure you have this many sources, this many projects, this many arrests. I'm like, but how do you do that? Like, how does one member truly do it? Because the corporal is doing the detachment commander stuff. He's not really responding to calls, but everything is on one member to do community engagements and show up and all kinds of stuff and do presentations at the school. So it was just incredible. As much as you didn't have a lot of call volumes, the workload was so huge in those places and just different. I'd show up to the domestic and instantly I'm the counselor. Right. I'm like, okay, well, we can't. Charge mandated policy is out the window here. So let's sit down. I'm like, okay, Bernie, what is it that you love about Joseph? Joseph, what is it that, you're big, she has beautiful brown eyes. You were right. Like, and they're making out before you leave the house. My sweet Jesus, broke. This would never fly in Fort McMurray, right? Like you can't do this. So it was just incredible when you look at the dynamics of the RCMP, for example, like Edmonton police, you'll never have that rural experience of working by yourself. And, and we're in a place where I'm like, I don't know why we have radios, because I'm always with the other person. I'm like, what happens if I press my 1033 button, my urgent button? Like, nothing. I'm like, who's coming? Who's coming for you? Like, nobody. Like, if you don't answer the radio within an hour, then, they'll try and find you. And then if the weather is good, then they might be able to send in the ERT team, but that could take a few days for somebody to get in. So you're truly like, why do we have this? It's pointless. You're just, so it's something confident, I guess, knowing we could just be shot up here and it would take somebody maybe a week to find us. So that in itself was just different, right? Like the concept of backup, that wasn't there.
Yeah, so that is so interesting. I love hearing about these little opportunities that the RCMP have, because Sandra was saying too, she had one where they were in a fly-in community in northern Manitoba, and same thing, fly in, you're there for, I think she said 2 weeks, you're doing the community, and she said, yeah, it's her and another constable, and you're doing everything, everything, and how, because before that she was just outside of Winnipeg, same thing, bigger detachment, more things, right? And she was just like, yeah, you're like, okay, so this is totally different policing. This is totally different policing. Even though it's the same, I'm wearing the same uniform, I'm still employed by the same employer. This is a total different ball of wax. So, okay, and so you go from Fort McMurray, you go to Hinton. What was Hinton like? What were you doing in Hinton? Were you back to regular patrol? Were you still kind of working major crimes? How did that kind of play out?
Yeah, so I went back to Hinton and I went general duty in Hinton frontline again. Again, was just kind of really looking for slower pace, just want to our focus, my husband and I, it's let's just focus on life. Let's just take it in. It's not all about work. And Fort Mac is such a rat race for work, right? Regardless what you're working in. So I went to the front line, promoted not long after into frontline corporal, and just had babies. Really, Hinton was really good for the water, incredible, really. So had a few kids there in Hinton. And then got my transfer. So it was frontline stuff, and Hinton was different. Like, first of all, Fort Mac, Fort Mac's drug scene was cocaine, right? Like it was crack and it was coke. Like that is what I knew, being this naive little person coming, not knowing what drugs were. I mean, weed, sure, but that's all I seen. Like I remember people from Vancouver coming up like, hey, like, how do you get heroin here? I'm like, you don't. It's coke or it's crack. Like you don't, right? Like, come on, don't be dirty. So it was like that, and that was it. So then I get to Hinton and it's meth, and that was a whole new ball game. Like the Edson Hinton area was truly a lot more meth going on. And that to me, I was like, I will take a crack hit any day, right? Like, they might have superhuman strength, but they still know that I'm a police officer, right? Like I'm not some demon from hell and they're ripping themselves open. Like so that was definitely interesting, is dealing with that different, like, drug addict and that different, I guess just behavioral response when you're dealing, because it truly is different, right? Like totally. Again, when you're dealing with people that's high on coke or crack, you know how to talk to them, and you know that there's still some level of rationalization with them, or of course you had so much backup that you could take them if you really need to, and your paramedics could sedate them if they needed to, which I thought that was funny going to Hinton, where I'm like, hey, can you just give them a needle, give them a shot of your horse tranquilizer, what do you do? And they're like, no, you can't do that. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, you're like, don't fight this guy. Like, this is bullshit. You're like, Fort Mac, all that. I don't know what they needed, but the ambulance, feel like they just call up the ER doc. Yeah, can we? Yeah, authorize, great, and hit him up with something and calm him down. And Hinton was like, fuck, now I gotta fight. Now I have to fight this person, and the ambulance will just stand by and help me when I'm broken. But it was different. Like it was different that way. Definitely a lot more property crimes, not so much person crimes like what I've seen in Fort Mac. So lower level violence for sure, but it's again dealing with that unpredictability of the meth, and that was different. That was definitely learning curve there.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I agree with you. I think because we saw the same thing in corrections, right? When I initially started, it was like coke, or it was weed laced with coke. And so then they were coming in and they were kind of mellow, but crazy, mellow, but crazy, mellow, but crazy, right? And then when meth came in, it was like, holy frick. Like when they came in and they were high on meth, you were just like, okay, everybody get ready to battle, because this is what's we know it's gonna go down. It isn't if it's gonna go down, it's when it's gonna go down, and how bad it's going to be when it goes down, because there's nothing there. It's like there's nothing in their eyes. They're not responding to any cues. They're, like you said, you're a demon. They're hallucinating. It's like, it's a whole different ballgame for sure. For us, then it became, okay, now we're into fentanyl. Now we're into, oxys. Now we're into, and it's like, so you ride the wave of like, what drug is the new thing that's coming through right now, right? Like, and how are we going to react to this? So I totally hear you. Yeah. Okay, so we go to Edmonton. We're working at K Division at that point, because you were in the policies unit, and then they handpick you and say, we want you to succeed, Tamara. She started some of this work, did a phenomenal job. As usual, Tamara's was just an amazing officer, amazing human, miss her all the time. And you kind of step into her footsteps and say, okay, I'm going to take this program, which isn't a program, and I'm going to make it into something. So walk me through how that kind of played out. What did you have to build? How did you start to do this? Like, I'm assuming you would have had to have taken a lot of training to kind of get up to speed with what you needed to then kind of develop. So talk to me about how you developed all of this stuff.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think anybody who knew Tamara Sampson as well, it's kind of like an Amazon warrior. Like, she's a huge woman. Like, I mean, even at her funeral, I talked about how she had 150 pounds of just muscle alone on her frame, and not too many funerals you could talk about a woman's weight, but she was proud of that. Just a beast of a woman. That's who you wanted on your rugby team for sure. So I always said, those are big highbrowns, right? Those were big boots that I had to fill, because truly they were big. And she was so well, just she was just a grounded woman, and just so well respected that, to me, it was a big role to fill. And of course, just wanted to do honor to her, but also knowing like how respected she was for the officers to trust me with her work was an honor. So, I said, well, we need to review our own files. And like, first thing I was like, okay, well, let's see, what do we have for sexual violence? Like, what am I working with here? And it was nothing. It was nothing. And I'm like, the crap. So it didn't take long to start reviewing files and just seeing like, okay, what are we missing? We're not doing complete investigations. We're not interviewing the witnesses. When you go like, oh, this is what the victim says, what should I do? Like, I don't know, your fucking job. Like, how about you do a file? Like, how about you actually investigate shit? So it was very clear that our members were just lacking guidance. They were lacking direction. They didn't know what to do. And so I started trying to see what do I need to learn and how do I learn? And I was very thankful, or like very lucky, I guess, and thankful that there were a couple of people already in the RCMP that were working in small realms, like on committees, right? So Alberta Justice had a sexual violence police advisory committee. So a couple of our members were kind of there, sexual violence wasn't their role, but, being a sergeant in GIS, if something happened, it might fall on your plate. Rick Chenet, who's superintendent now, was somebody else that got kind of put into the sexual violence world, doing some reviews of files before I came in. So I had these people that I got to know or knew already that kind of just helped show me, okay, who's who? Number one, who's who in the group? Who do you need to know? Who can help you? Reach out to this person. And they truly did, kind of lay the foundation and help just, here's the path, right? Like, this is the path that you need to go. And so I'm very thankful for those people that were there. And there were some guys that, were doing great work already within their own attachment. So just kind of tapped into what they were doing already and how do you expand that? And what is it that you have that we're lacking? And so then I found the site Ended Violence Against Women International, VAWI, EVAWI. And that is just full of resources and training for police officers. And most of it's free. Like, most of the stuff is like a PDF you go through, you can get a certificate, just incredible courses. And so I just started signing up for everything, like police training, sexual violence. And I would Google that and I'd find something out of like Hawaii and something else out of New York, something out of the UK, something else out of Toronto Police, and whatever I could find as a course, I would take. And then there was the International Association of Chief of Police. They also had some good training there. And I took a train the trainer, like a 6-week course with them, and a couple of their training actually on different things. So just really tried to like find as much as I could to learn as much as I could. So as much as I understood investigations and major case management principles, right? Like, so I could look at a file and see what was missing. It's the other part of that is recognizing, hey, what is different? It's that trauma piece, right? That trauma piece is different. Why is that person reacting the way that they reacted? And why is that reaction, perceived to be dishonest? Why are we perceiving that to be dishonest? And where are we missing things here? And so a lot of that came into like, recognizing your own bias as a police officer. And I don't even say as a police officer, because, we get kind of like, don't call me racist and don't call me bias. Like we get, we don't like that. So it's not police bias. It's truly societal bias. Right. And I've had so many even like community conversations with committees and older men. Like, yeah. So like, are we having that many sexual assaults, where women are jogging on the trail and getting attacked? And I find like, that is like your 1974 Chicago, like, no, like that is so rare. Right? It doesn't happen, sure, but that is rare, right? And so it's helping society to understand what is sexual violence, what is consent. And so if society as a whole doesn't understand that, and we've brought these police officers that, we just don't birth them at depot and mold them out of a factory. Like they came from society, right? And so if they're coming and they don't have that knowledge, which most society don't have, then guess what? Then they're just going to think the same way. And so it's helping. So then I really started to dive into, okay, how do I help these members now with this? So I created an info, like a web page, an internal web page for the RCMP. And I just started loading that with resources that were out there. Working with Alberta Justice and our committee, we've developed a best practice guide and a training course. We've developed a police officer resource card that you can give to victims, which basically lists all the resources in the province. Just finished a pocket guide for police officers right now, and just different things like that. Working on different initiatives with them, like third option with Alberta Health Services and being able to do an anonymous sexual assault evidence kit, and just kind of building on some of these programs, and truly like figuring out like, who's my ally? Like, who do I need to work with? right?
Mm-hmm.
And this whole concept of being trauma-informed and victim-centered, like those are two words that people like to throw around, and justice likes to throw around, and everybody's like, oh, we're victim-centered, and everybody goes like, I don't know what the fuck that is, but that's what we are. And it's like, what does it mean? Like, truly define, and like, what does that mean? Like, are our investigations trauma-informed and victim-centered, and what does that mean for people? Because our officers truly didn't understand. Like, oh, just like, do you believe them? Is that what it means? Like, but it's understanding like your approach to people, and understanding that people, some people just hate cops. Some people have an undeathly fear of cops, even like normal everyday citizens. I had a guy I played rugby with, you would know, Newf. He was in a minor car fender bender. And this is when I was still in Fort Mac and I'm working homicides, minor car bender. The poor guy like didn't know what to do. He was just so shooken up. And I was like, hey, come in when I'm working, I'll help you out. Right. Like, Nikki, like this is the most, like, this is policing 101. This is the most dumbest, simplest thing that we could ever do is take a collision. And so he comes in and he is just like shaken. He's beside himself. I'm like, you weren't even in the wrong here. Like, you didn't write off your vehicle. You're okay. And he's just like, I don't know. And he played rugby with us. There's a bunch of cops he knew, like, but it was just that like interaction with police that he's never had to interact with police in this type of manner. Right. And as much as it was a stupid little car accident that was nothing, like it shook him. And so like, so I use that in my training. Like, so a person who does not have anything against police can have that reaction coming in to fill out a collision form. Yeah. Now take a person who's just received them, like just had the most traumatizing thing ever happen to them, and the worst crime happened to them next to being a victim of homicide. And that's what Supreme Court case law tells us sexual assaults are. Yep. And sit them in a room with a police officer and expect for them to have, a very calm demeanor, cooperative reaction. Right. So, and that's where like this whole concept of being victim-centered trauma-informed is recognizing what people have been through, recognizing that, hey, we're not everybody's favorite people. We're probably the last person that anybody wants to tell about a sexual assault, let alone anything else, right? Yeah. So I started to really look into like how we were responding to victims, created some resources, like I said, and a whole website for them to go to, started reviewing case law. And truly, there's a case law from almost every sexual assault type of incident you can think of, and just added the main ones and just started putting those out there, and then started reviewing all the files. And then luckily was able, COVID was kind of a blessing in disguise, because then there was a whole bunch of people that needed work that couldn't come to work anymore. So I started reaching out to these other members, say, hey, like, here's what I'm looking for in files, and training them up to review files, and just getting that concept out there. So you need to be careful with trauma. And so it went from, like I said, nothing to I created a check sheet for investigators, and I hate check sheets. I know police officers listening, I'm like, we're all putting check sheets, right? And I won't use them myself, so maybe I'm a little bit of a hypocrite, but truly it was meant as it's an interactive guide. So like, hey, do you know who the suspect is? No. Oh, okay. Well, have you tried a confiscate, or have you tried neighborhood inquiries? Have you AKA, have you done more? There's always more that you can do. So really try to make that an interactive guide for them as investigators, but also for the supervisors when they're reviewing a file, they can look at their check sheet and go, okay, is it a complete and thorough file? Like, have we done everything we possibly could do on this file? And that's what we should be doing. And so it really then branched into, I developed a strategy plan. I put forth a number of business cases, like, recognize like, hey, here's this crime that, just started happening, when the world formed and men started to live on Earth, right? That's when the crime first started. And we have nothing. So how are we going to respond? Like, we need victim programs. We need awareness for our investigators. We need investigative accountability. We need oversight on our files to make sure they're getting it right. Because our supervisors were never taught this stuff either. So if they don't know, like, they don't know. So and I can't just sit here and shit on people for doing a shitty job when we've never taught them how to do that job. Yeah. Right? So a lot of it came back to training. And so I started doing some, because again, it was COVID, virtual training with different detachments, and set up meetings like this, and just go through, put together a presentation for them. And I'd have members call me all the time on a file, and it could be an hour or 2 hour conversation just about like thinking differently, asking your questions differently. What happens when you ask your questions differently? When we get out of this on police officer, who, what, when, where, why, which are all just stupid questions, right? And you focus on, what do you recall seeing? What do you recall hearing? What do you recall feel? What do you recall thinking? What's one thing you can't forget? When you get asked those questions, it unlocks like a whole vault of just sensory data, right? So when you have a victim that now says, I don't know, I went out of body, I just focused somewhere else, I can't give you a description, I don't know what he looked like at all. Oh, okay. So tell me about your out of body. What were you doing? Well, I was on a beach. Tell me about your beach experience. What's everything that you can remember seeing, feeling, smelling, all these things? And it goes like, well, the sand was really, really coarse and it was hurting. What do you mean it was hurting? It was hurting my vagina. Can you explain more to that? Like what was happening that the sand was hurting vagina? Well, at the time that I was thinking the sand was hurting my vagina, he was actually going down on me. And I remember he had a really scruffy red beard and it was hurting my vagina when he was eating my vagina. Like, oh, great. Now we have a description of the guy where before she didn't, like, what did he look like? I don't know. Okay. But because we unlocked that sensory of what she was thinking and feeling, that coarse sand on her vagina on the beach was truly, really him eating her out. And now she has the description of this big red coarse beard, right? Which we would never had. So it's just, it came down to trying to like just reshape how we ask questions, understand why we have to reshape those questions, understand why victims don't come forward to start, and why we have to kind of just set with that open mindset of belief and how our response changes what we're going to get. Right. So if we're coming in and if we are accusatory, so us in any way, shape, or form, like, you know, why did you do this? Or why didn't you do this? That's a blaming question. Right.
Yep.
And they already think you're not going to believe them. So, and that's truly like where I started to focus my training is on that trauma piece, understanding trauma. And as police officers, we can all say, hey, Nikki, if you shoot somebody today, when can I interview you? Oh, 2 days, 3 days, do not come. I'll get my union rep. You can't talk to me. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So we understand that. Like, if I shoot somebody, nobody's allowed to take a statement from me for 2-3 days. Why? Well, I need to get rest. I need a sleep cycle. Why? Well, just that's how it is. No, it's because of trauma and because what you say to me today, there's going to be gaps in your memory. Your body needs time and rest so that those memories can be encoded properly and put back in order. Because right now it's scrambled and you're still in survivor mode. Right? So you can understand that. Why do we give a gun back to an officer who's involved in a shooting? Right? It's to empower them. Yeah. Because you have a member who was just involved in a shooting and you take his gun away or her gun away. It's like, holy shit, you're stripping my identity. Like, did I do something wrong? It's accusatory, right? Like they automatically did something wrong. And so instantly you have another officer or another gun that goes right back in their holster, or you give them your duty belt as an officer and say, here you go, right? So that they don't feel like you're stripping their power away. So we can understand that as a police officer. Let's look at a sexual assault victim who's just had all the power and dignity stripped away from them. We need to start giving them that back, right? And that starts with choice. That starts with choice of investigation, choice how they report, choice on what they choose to tell us or not, and empowering them to speak their truth when they're ready and able to do so, right? Instead of sitting there and trying to strip it away with, well, what were you wearing? Why were you wearing that? Why didn't you say no? Why didn't you push back? Did you say no? And those accusatory questions, which they're already asking themselves that, going, why did I fucking let this happen? Well, you didn't. Yeah. You didn't. Right?
Yeah. Or how could I let this happen? I didn't dress this way. I didn't do this. I didn't drink. I didn't I did all the right things. How did this happen? Yeah. Right. I'm like, I just listening to you talk. I love your passion. Like I absolutely love it. I love that very clearly I can hear coming from you, your desire to make it better for not only officers, because you want them to be better officers. We all want police officers to be better officers, right? We want them to be the best, serving the best they possibly can. But I absolutely love the fact that coming through loud and clear to me, and I'm sure it's coming through loud and clear to our listeners, is your desire to make sure that our victims, our community, our society, our people that we live and breathe and work with feel safe and are able to process what has happened in a way that will help them eventually not get over it, because you're never going to get over that, but be able to move forward with, a sense of purpose in their life, and that they were believed, they were listened to, they were able to put out what they wanted to put out for, like, again, reporting how they wanted to do it. Like, it just, like I said, I got goosebumps because I love it. People like you and your absolute commitment to doing the best job that you possibly can are who we need in these roles. We need people like you who are going to advocate for victims, who are going to advocate for officers, and who are not going to place blame and who are not going to judge, either the victim or the officer. Yeah, so you wrote a shitty investigation. So you didn't do 100% of the things you should have done, but you didn't know how to do it. So let's teach you how to do it, because you can't do it if you don't know, right? And so the fact that you've identified that piece and are sharing these resources, are trying to get that information out there. And again, I mean, we can only do what we can in sharing that information. If people choose not to take the information, if people choose to continue with their personal biases or continue with, yeah, okay, that's bullshit, yeah, okay, she dressed like that, so she deserved it, right? And again, that bias is out there. Like the fact that you're at least putting it out there, that you saw this gap in knowledge and then have basically worked tirelessly for the last 3 years to get this information out there and to create this team and create this project. I mean, like that is like, I love it. I love it. I think it's amazing. I think you are an amazing human being. And I'm like so proud to know you and know that you're doing these things out there. Like legit. I love it. I love it so much.
Thank you.
I'm cognizant of time. I've already taken up half of your morning. So I want to jump into a couple questions I have for you, just in regards to kind of what's been going on in your role, how you're staying current, things like that. And then I always love to finish off with rapid fires because I love to keep people on their toes. But can you tell me, so like, how are you continuing to learn in order to stay on top of things within your role? Because I'm assuming that things change every day. There's new research that comes out. There's new interview techniques, things like that. How do you kind of stay on top of that and then share that knowledge with the other officers?
Well, I continue to take webinars, training that comes up, and from a variety of sources as well, right? Because you always learn something from something else. And maybe it's information that you know already, but maybe there's a new example, or maybe there's a new term, or there's something else that's like a different concept of teaching that is like, oh, okay, maybe that concept would work better for this group of people. So I always just continue to take all the courses, even if I know about trauma response and everything else, I'll still take more, because there's always new research, of course, that's coming out as well that talks about that physiological response and why does it happen, and current trends, like what we're finding, like, and even just like, hey, here's a new program, here's another way that we can advocate for justice of victims, right? Or another way we can deal with the outcomes of files. Maybe not everything has to go through court. And so just staying open to new concepts and ideas is truly important. So I continue to do that and develop that for myself, just so that I'm current and on trend. Because again, like things change. Like how I did interviews back in Fort McMurray has now changed, right? So now we're going back to more of like an empathy-based interrogation, if you will, where, hey, I truly care about you, bad guy. And as much as we always say rapport, that empathy part is so huge. And if empathy is so huge for a bad guy to tell us what he did, do you not think it's more important for the victim, so that we feel like we actually care? So having to stay up to date on those type of concepts and just look and just, even what are our friends down south of the border doing? Like, what are some legislative changes they have made down there? What are some things that are kind of happening down there that's been success stories for them? So just staying current with the different approaches, different organizations as well, and what they're doing. And just I work hand in hand with ASAS, so the Alberta, or Association of Alberta Sexual Assault Services. Everything I do is with them. And I think as a police, that is the most important thing you can do, is if you're working, especially some type of victim crime, be it domestic, gender-based violence, hate crime, whatever, your victim advocates are your number one partner. So I don't develop anything without it going through them. When we wrote our policy, which was a huge robust policy, here, ASAS, review it. Is it victim-centered? Is what I'm saying, does that make sense, right? Is that going to come off appropriate to a victim if we act this way, respond this way? Understand that there are some things where, we have to do certain things a certain way. How do we make sure we're still acting in a compassionate manner? So that went to ASAS. Our check forms with ASAS. If I'm going to do a public media release, or for Sexual Awareness Month, hey, can you review this? Does that sound good? And so they became my number one ally to make sure that we're still getting it right with that victim lens, and just staying in touch with those partners and seeing their point of view and their perspective. And I've taken that perspective back in a lot of files going, okay, I understand that perspective. This may be why a victim may recant. So is it truly an unfounded file right now, or is there something else that's happening behind the scenes that we just don't know about? So just being open. So that's how I've managed, I guess, to stay kind of like current and keep developing, just because I want to make sure I have the best knowledge to also give to our members to give to treat victims the appropriate way.
I love it. That's amazing. And so all of these resources that you're talking about, I'm going to be throwing them in the show notes. So if you're listening and you're like, hey, I want to learn more about this, or if you've been a victim of sexual assault and maybe didn't have the experience that you feel you should have, or are still feeling that there's things coming up and you're needing assistance, we're going to put like I said, the resources in the show notes. And then you can access that stuff from there. Okay. So what is the biggest surprise you've had in the last few months? So this could even be like just in your life. It could be in your life. It could be in your work. It could be whatever.
Yeah. Well, I think the biggest surprise is that we have a new sergeant coming in to KSART, and I'm happy to pass that torch on and just trust the universe. Right, as hippie and witchy that might sound, like everything I've so learned in my life that everything negative happens so that something positive may result. Right? Mm-hmm. And so even right now, if I feel veiled and I don't know what's going on and maybe in the dark, hey, this truly has got to be for the positive down the road, right? And so I was hoping, I guess in my head, my plan was another 2 to 3 years in the unit, have it established and be able to move on, but it's going to be quicker than that. So it's having to pass that torch on. And hey, maybe you may not feel ready to do that, or you have more to give. Universe says move on, and you have to kind of just trust that. And I know in my life, everything has always lined up for this moment, right? Everything for all my work, my own personal experiences of sexual assault and everything else have always lined up to make me the best cop that I can be, right? For that program, because I get it. So this happened to me. It's shitty. Great. How do I use that shitty experience to be better or to do better? And so that's, I think, really like the big surprise. And you have to just take it with grace, take it without ego. If you're in a position of service, there's no room for ego, because it's about you then, and it's not about the work. It's not about the greater good. It's not about the community. And so it's just being mindful of that to move forward.
I love it. I love it. You're like literally throwing down like wisdom bombs. Like I'm just like, oh, like she's fucking amazing. I would like to quickly touch on the fact that you got ducks this summer. Can we have a quick can you tell me a duck story? Because I just saw it on Facebook and I was like, oh my god, she got fucking ducks.
So yeah, funny story. This is really conflicting now, because again, ducks were like my spirit animal. I got this little tattoo of duck prints on my wrist, and that was for my friend that I mentioned earlier that went missing and had died. And so like that was just kind of our thing. And so anytime I seen ducks, like the morning Tamara died, there was a duck, right? And not only was there a duck, there was the drake and there was a hen, and I never see the male and female together. So, and I took note, like, oh, look, that's so weird. There's the two ducks. Because anytime I seen a duck, I'm like, oh, it's Michael. He's watching over me. And this morning I seen two. Of course, get to the office and find out that Tamara died. So to me, whether you want to believe my hokey pokey witchy shit, don't really care. But that was my sign that, hey, she's okay, right? So ducks, my spirit animal. So when my husband suggests, like, hey, let's get ducks. Why not? We're crazy enough. Let's do that. We got a bunch of ducks. It turns out that male ducks are really rapey. Like I like, holy shit, are they rapey? Like I just, to the point that I couldn't stand. We had one drake left, but we had to get rid of all of our males because they would just literally will mate the female to death if there's not enough of them to go around. It's not a pretty thing to watch. And so to the point that I just left my drake out for a couple of nights, and eventually a fox came, took him. I'm like, great, we're good. Ladies, they're all happy. Nobody's being raped anymore. Like they're terrible. And that female ducks actually have like a dual vagina chamber. Like, remember earlier when I said I failed biology? So this is that comes in play here. Okay. Where they can actually like basically shut down their reproductive organs so that if they're being raped by a drake, they won't produce by them. Right? I'm like, could you imagine if the females evolved to that level where we get raped, we don't have to worry about being pregnant because we can just shut the chamber? Anyways, so I thought that was kind of like, great, here's my spirit animal. It turns out that they like to rape their women brutally, and now I just like the female hens, that like the female ducks. That's where I'm at. Oh, fun! They're so cute. I love them. They just waddle along. Their eggs. They give us eggs in the summer. They're freaking delicious. And they're just funny little creatures that they're just funny. I love them.
That is so funny. That not at all in any way, shape, or form did I think that it was going to go that direction when I asked that question.
Right.
But I'm
Yeah.
so glad it did because that was fucking awesome. Oh my God. I
Yeah,
literally,
actually.
well, I literally, because I saw it and know you're out on an acreage. And so I was like, oh, like ducks, because we're going to get chickens for our place. And I was like, well, maybe I'll get ducks. I'm not getting ducks now. I'm not getting ducks. I'm going
Just
to
don't
stick
get
with
the mail.
chickens.
You just don't get
Like,
the mail.
oh
Yeah.
my God.
Yeah.
And I love it, the circle of life. So then a fox came and took him. And then, problem solved.
Yeah. And I fed a fox, which is my husband's spirit animal. So that's great. We're all happy. Everybody's happy, like karma, right?
I love it. I love it. Okay, so I'm going to wrap up with these rapid fire questions. I've got three for you. Again, some could be one word answers, some could be kind of a little bit of a story, but you got to think on your feet. So, what is the coolest location you've ever worked at or been to on a call?
I'm going to say Chesterfield Inlet. I got to see a polar bear. I got to see narwhals. Yeah, just a great experience. I love the North, love Nunavut. Beautiful spot.
That's awesome. So cool. A
Yeah.
narwhal would be the coolest thing ever. I think that would be amazing to see. And a polar bear. I mean, all of it would be
Yeah.
amazing. That's awesome. Okay, what is a piece of advice for somebody that's entering the career?
I'm going to go back to what I said earlier. Like, know what your passion is and keep that, right? And have it. And I think that's, we talked earlier, Nikki, about, moving on from KSAR. Like that to me became so much of an identity and passion that leaving that is almost empty because like, now what's next? And I have to swallow my own words and take my own advice. Like find something that you love and that's passionate about because truly, this is a job and it's a career. You can be replaced tomorrow. You can be told you need to go over here, or you're being deployed here, you're being transferred here. So having that stability outside, so hey, it's for you and it's rugby and I'm going to get my ass in shape so I can join you on that field again soon.
Yes.
Or it's boxing, or it's crocheting, or it's like whatever, paint by numbers. I don't care. Have something that you can also focus energy on and love. And it's a consistent. So it's there regardless what happens to your career, that's there. And that also helps kind of keep you grounded. And from that dark place where I went when I first began, like as a newbie member, it's so hard because, hey, like I wanted to help people and I didn't realize I was dealing with all this bad. I didn't know how much bad was in the world. And, the world truly isn't that bad. So you have to find the ways to see the good in the world, and doing that by being involved, especially sports is always such a great one because you meet so many different people, but you have to find something outside that just kind of regrounds, resets you and realize, yeah, work is the 1% of the world right now. What I deal with, even though that's my whole world, that is 1% of the true population in the world and people that's out there, and focus your attentions on, the people that truly deserve it, the good people. And that's why you're in this job, is to help those good people.
Yeah. I think too on that kind of thought, because I had the same thing. And that literally is what saved me moving through my career, was having things outside of the jail. So having rugby, having Stamping Up. I make cards like a total dork and I love it. It's amazing, right? Teaching classes, like teaching yoga, teaching fitness, like those were my things outside. And because I feel like in a law enforcement career or in a first responder career, you like exactly like you said, that becomes your identity. And so that becomes Nikki, the correctional officer, is who I am, right? Well, no, I'm actually Nikki, the correctional officer. I'm Nikki, the mom. I'm Nikki, the Stampin' Up girl. I'm Nikki, the rugby girl. I'm Nikki, the right. Like work is only maybe not 1% of us, but work is only a percentage of us. We are this whole other being outside of it. But if you let the other side of you go and you just become so and so the police officer, so and so the firefighter, so and so the paramedic, your lenses become totally clouded. You become very judgmental. You become very, again, like you're saying, like just assuming that everybody is bad or that the whole world is stupid. That's another one. The whole world, like these are the dumbest fucking people I've ever met in my life. Oh my God, right? Well, no, they're just having the worst day of their fucking life. So yeah, they're making dumb decisions or they're saying dumb things or they're acting stupid, right? So yeah, I totally agree with that. Having something outside of what you are, or what you do that is totally separate is necessary. It's an absolute must for when you're in a first responder career. Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, last one. What is your favorite food, favorite snack when you were on shift? So this could be like back when you were a frontline officer. This could be right now when you're jonesing at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, what are you reaching for?
It's probably McDonald's. I'm not gonna lie. Like I am diehard McDonald's fan. Worked there for 4.5 years through university, and so like nope, could never be sick of McDonald's ever. Um, Fort Mac, Joma's Pizza. Yeah, big shout out to them. They were freaking fantastic. And it was one Shell station that had Mr. Sub, and if it came in at 3 o'clock in the morning, the lady there was amazing. She's like, no, 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 no. Only fresh stuff for you. And she would dice up the new tomatoes and take out the new lettuce. And I had the freshest sub ever. So yeah. I don't know if I ever got desperate enough for 7-Eleven chicken on a stick. I just think like I was thankfully McDonald's ran 24/7 that I could just grab a cheeseburger.
Do you know what? It's so funny because I've asked this question on basically every single episode, and almost every single first responders reaction is burgers. Like everybody's reaching for a burger. Everybody's like, and it's wherever, right? Homemade
Yeah.
burgers, McDonald's burgers, Whopper burgers, like it's burgers. Like people are reaching for the burgers. So I'm gonna give a shout out to all of the places that make burgers. Thank you for keeping first responders going. Awesome. Okay, well, that is all I have for you today, girl. It has been so fun chatting with you. Like I miss you. We need to get together way more often than just talking every now and again. But thank you for coming on. Thank you for being vulnerable. Thank you for sharing all of your amazing knowledge. Like I can't wait to put up the show notes and be able to have people like look at some of these resources. Officers that are listening, starting to kind of reevaluate how they're questioning people, how they're asking, how they're interviewing. I think that's just phenomenal. And again, just love having you on. I would love to have you on again, because I know that Sheila Farrell, who was my episode 2 paramedic, had asked a question off the show about what can we do as paramedics to make it better for sexual assault victims? What can we do to help the police when we're responding to a sexual assault? So I would love to kind of walk through that in season 2 and talk about, how as partners, right? If you're taking, somebody from the jail that has been sexually assaulted and we're taking them to the hospital, how can correctional officers help? What can nurses do that would potentially be helpful to a sexual assault victim? What education can we share with first responders to make it better for those victims? So definitely
Absolutely.
season 2, you will be back, my love. Whether you want to or
Awesome.
not, I'll just kidnap you and take you for beers and then quickly start recording.
Sure, no problem. Hey, you can always bribe me with a beer. That's fine. But no, this is, Nikki, it's been an honor to do this for you. And happy, more than happy. Would love to come back and just help more first responders get it right.
Love it. Love it. Okay. I hope you have an amazing rest of your day, girl. Take care.
You too.
Well, that's it for today, guys. Thanks so much for listening, tuning in, and sharing your time and energy with us. Make sure you check out our next episode starring another badass female first responder on Apple, Spotify, or TuneIn. And make sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Blue Line Fitness Testing. Stay safe and keep your head on a swivel. Well, that's it for today, guys. Thanks so much for listening, tuning in, and sharing your time and energy with us. Make sure you check out our next episode starring another badass female first responder on Apple, Spotify, or TuneIn. And make sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Blue Line Fitness Testing. Stay safe and keep your head on a swivel.